How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Aleph, Daf 51 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends, let me tell you what's going on over here with Daf 51. Not Pasha times. You know what? To show that it's not Pasha times, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. 1 second. Alright, I just rolled up my sleeves. We're going to get our hands dirty over here. Chevra, I learned this daf on Yom Kippur. This is not the kind of daf you want to learn on Yom Kippur, friends. Yom Kippur, you want to learn an easy daf, I don't know. An easy one. This is the opposite of easy. I'll tell you, at the end we get a shtickle Yevamis at the end. At the end we get to Yevamis. We get to Yevamis at the end. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, Rivka, I'm telling you. That's today's daf. But in the meantime, it's also okay. It's also whatever it is, what it is. Givaldik. I'm gonna probably complain tomorrow as well. No, maybe just today. Okay, fine. So now, okay. What are we talking about? Kol she'eshnu b'zeh achazeh enu b'vasachas. Kiddushin she'nim sorim nevia. Are they Kiddushin? Not Kiddushin? Friends, this is today's sugyas. This is in today's stuff. Not easy stuff, but as I've said before. What have I said? What have I said before? What I've said before is we learn every daf, no matter what's on it. We learned Masechta Yevamis. We're going to learn today's daf too. Let's go weiter. All right, daf Nun Amud Beis. We're going to start at the Mishnah, about 5 lines before it gets wide. Here goes everything. Alright. Says the Mishnah, Mekadesh Isha Uvita. Okay, a fellow is Mekadesh a fella and her daughter, or Isha V'achosa, or a fella and her sister, Ke'achas at the same time. So Be'etzim he gives them, he finds a mother-daughter combo, duo, and he says, I'm being Mekadesh both of you. Or he finds a sister-sister duo, and he says, I'm being Mekadesh both of you. So in that case, Einam Mekudashos. They are not, there's no Kiddushin, there's no Gittin, nothing. Kiddushin is irrelevant in this case. Because there are rayos, of course. You can't be married to a mother, daughter, or 2 sisters. So if he's Mekadesh both of them at the same time, forget about it. There's a Maise. There were 5 women in the Maise. Now of these 5 women, 2 of them were sisters. The other 3 were unrelated. Velikate Adam echad kalkala shel teinim, and a fellow put together a basket of figs. Were they dried figs? Were they fresh figs? From Shuk Machne Yehuda? I don't know. A basket of figs. And the figs belonged to these women. And it was Shemitah. Okay, fine. Okay, so Betzim was Hefker. Okay, whatever. We'll get to that, I think, tomorrow's daf. And he says, all of you are mikudashos to me. With this basket of figs. One of them accepted it on behalf of the entire group of 5. And the Chacham said, the sisters are not mikudashos, but everybody else, I guess, is. Okay, fine. Well, we're going to have to exactly figure out how to learn this Mishnah, but okay, that was exciting times, right? Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, how do we know that 2 sisters cannot be married, right? So if you, right? Are we talking about, yeah. So if, how do I know that if a fellow goes over to a fella and her sister and says, I'm being Mekadesh, the both of yous, that it's irrelevant? How do we know this? Amar Rami Bar Chama. So it's Rami Bar Chama, the Amar Krab, because the pasuk says V'isha elachosa, 2 sisters. Lo sikach litzror. You can't make them into tzaras. HaTorah Amar, the Torah says B'shoshanais tzaras olazo. If you're going to make them into tzaras, into co-wives, if you're going to say I'm being Mekadesh both of you at the same time, and now you're co-wives of mine. Lo yehelo likuchim. There's not going to be any Kiddushin with even one of them. It's irrelevant. It's null and void. It's null and void. Okay? So if a fellow is Mekadesh 2 sisters, and by being Mekadesh them, they would be co-wives, they would be tzaras, so it's irrelevant. Kiddushin is not shaykh. So there you have it. that Kiddushin is not shaykh by sisters. Omar le Rave, but Rave says Rami Bar Chama, but if that's the case, that the pasuk is talking about when you mekadesh two sisters at the same time, Hainu dichsev v'nichesu hanefashos haosus mikev amam. It says a few psukim later that anybody who violates any of these arayos, so then you get kares. Now it says Rave, I don't understand. Kiddushin lo tafseba. If we're saying that the pasuk is talking about when he's mekadesh two sisters at the same time, and it's not Kiddushin, it's nothing. So why would they be chayiv kares? If it's nothing, you can't be chayiv kares for nothing. So right, so Kiddushin lo tafseba kares mi mechayiv. If Kiddushin isn't shaykh in that case, then how could they be chayiv kares? They're not chayiv nothing. Ella, or so how could, I guess, he be chayiv kares, they be chayiv kares, whoever's involved be chayiv kares. Ella. Oh my Rave, rather says Rave, Kra, Boze Acharze, rather no. The pasuk is talking about one after the other, meaning, if a fellow is Mekadesh a fella, so of course that's good Kiddushin, a fellow can be Mekadesh a fella, but then, if after he's married to a fella, he then marries her sister, that is going to be a problem. So the pasuk is talking about Boze Acharze, and in that case, there would be a Chiyuv Kares. Umasnisin, Kiderabba. And our Mishnah is talking about at the same time, that if he's Mekadesh two sisters at the same time, then it is not Kiddushin. Rabba, because Rabba says, Kol she'enu baze acharze, afilu b'vasachas eno. That whenever you have a situation that can't happen, sequentially, does that make sense? A sequence is like, I think, one thing followed by another thing. So if it can't happen sequentially, so then it also can't happen at the same timely, that which is in parallel. He can't do it at the same time, at the same timely. So right? That's a word, right, Dennis? So if he can't be Mekadesh a fella, and then after he's Mekadesh a fella, be Mekadesh her sister, so then he also can't be Mekadesh the fella and her sister at the same timely, at the same time, be'etzim. Okay, so the pasuk says you can't be Mekadesh a fella and then later be Mekadesh your sister, and if you do that, then you'll be chayiv kares. If you sleep with a sister when you marry, the sister of your wife. So and then our Mishnah is saying that if he is Mekadesh both of them at the same time, it's gunish, it's nothing. Givaldik. Now we are going to go weiter and we're going to learn about this concept of kol she'eno boze acharze afilu b'vasachas eno. So gufa, so we just said, my Rabba says Rabba, kol she'eno boze acharze afilu b'vasachas eno, that whenever you can't have something work sequentially, it also cannot work at the same timely. So Esvei. So Abaye, however, has a kasha. Hamarbe b'maiser peirosov. Amarbe b'maiser peirosov misukonim umaisrosov mikul kolin ve'amai nemo kol she'enu boze acharze afilu b'vasachas eno. Chever, you hear the kasha? Probably not, because it's not so easy, not so hard, but you probably don't get it by me just reading it. I'll explain it. What this is talking about is you have a fellow who has what should we say? 10 stalks of wheat. Keep things simple. I think that'll keep things simple. You have a guy. Why not? I think if we just do it like that, I think that'll be simple. Let's try it out. If it's not simple, we could recalculate. He has 10 stalks of wheat. He has to separate Meiser. So Meiser is of course the 10th. So what are you supposed to do? You take one stalk, you separate it as Meiser. Bob's your uncle. I think that means like Givaldik. So, but that's not what he does. Instead, he divides it up into 5 groups of 2. And he takes one of these groups, right, 1/5. He takes one of these groups and separates that as Meiser, i.e., instead of separating 10%, he's separating 20%. And he's doing it all at the same time, right? He's dividing his 10 stalks into 5 groups of 2. And he's taking one of the groups that has 2 stalks in it, and he's separating it as Meiser. Now he's only supposed to separate one of the 10 stalks, not two of them, but he separates two of them, and that's going to be his meiser. So he's marbe b'meiser. He's giving too much. He's separating too much meiser. Now the thing is, if he would have these 10 stalks and he would separate one of the stalks, and that would be his meiser. Okay, takes 1 out of 10, separates that as meiser, gewaldig. So if after separating one of the stalks, he then takes a second stalk and separates it as meiser, it's irrelevant. He already separated his meiser. When he now separates meiser a second time, it's a joke. It's irrelevant. So here's an example of something that is eino boze acharze, right? If he separates one of the 10 stalks as meiser, and then he separates a second of the 10 stalks, that second of the 10 stalks is irrelevant. So eino boze acharze, it's irrelevant when it's sequentially, and yet we're saying that when he separates both of them at the same time, we're saying peros of mitukanim. He's successfully separated meiser. I mean, he says umaisosim mikulkolin. His meiser's all messed up because it's tevel and meiser mixed together. But half of it's tevel, half of it's meiser. But he successfully separated meiser. So again, from the top of the page, hamarbe b'meiser, somebody who gives too much meiser, right, separates 20% instead of 10%, right, and he separates them at the same time. Peiros of misukanim, so his fruits are meisered, but umeiser's mikukolim, but his meiser's all messed up because it's mixed together with tevel. Ve'amai, but why are his fruits meisered? Nema kol she'eino boze acharze. Well, if it's irrelevant when you do it sequentially, if you would first separate one stalk and then separate a second stalk as meiser, that second stalk is irrelevant, it's not meiser. So afilu b'vas achas eino. So I should say that also when he separates both of these two stalks at the same time, it's also irrelevant. Why are we saying that his fruits are meisered? So Omar Lei, so I guess Rabbah answers Abaye, shiny meiser, don't ask me kashas for meiser, de'ise lachatzoyim, because you could separate meiser in 50%. De'i Omer tiskadish palga dechitza kidsha. Because he could say that I'm separating meiser, the meiser is half of each stalk, meaning a fellow can separate two of the 10 stalks and say half of each of these two stalks are meiser, and that's completely fine. So half of each of the two stalks would be meiser, and that's 10% of the total, and that is totally fine meiser. So because a person can do that, that is why you could separate. That's why we're saying that if he separates the two stalks as his meiser, it's okay, because you can technically separate half of each of the two stalks, and that would be fine. So therefore, that is why, even though if you separate one stalk as meiser, and then you try to separate a second stalk as meiser, that second stalk is irrelevant because you already separated the meiser. But if you separate two stalks as your meiser, well, you could have half of each of those two stalks as meiser, and that would be completely fine. Okay, fine. Vare meiser behema. But what about meiser behema? Deleko lachatzoyin. You can't separate, half of two animals, right? So how does meiser behema work? Meiser behema works that you have cows, and then so you have the cows. You walk them through. You have 10 cows, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the 10th one, I think you mark it with like some red paint or something, and then you bring it to the Yerushalayim, and you offer it as a korban, and then you eat the meat. I think it's B'esem Shalomim, I think. So the 10th animal is meiser behema. You can't separate the 10th and the 11th and say half of each one is going to be meiser behema. That doesn't work. So here's an example of something that you cannot divide into halves. Right, meiser behema, the leka lachatzoyin, you can't offer in halves. V'leka boze acharze, and also boze acharze is irrelevant. So if the 10th animal you separate as meiser, and then the 11th animal you eichit separate as meiser, it's irrelevant. You already separated the 10th animal as meiser. It's meiser. When you separate the 11th one as meiser, it's irrelevant. So here we have an example of something that she'eno boze acharze, and yet v'amarova yosu shnayim ba'asiri v'kara'an asiri Asir v'achadasar marovim zeh bo zeh. So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then what does it say? Yotzu shnayim ba'asiri. If then after the 9th one, 10 and 11 go out at the same time, and you be'etzem, you make both of them 10. They both came out at the same time, you made both of them 10. So we say, when you do it at the same time, even though we said that if you separate the 10th, and then you separate at the 11th as Meiser as well, we say that's irrelevant. You already separated Meiser. But we're saying if at the same time you declare 10 and 11 at the same time as Meiser, well then we say, well now they're mixed together. One of them is going to be Meiser. We don't say that it's completely irrelevant. We don't say it's completely irrelevant. But based on Rabba's Svara, that if it's not Bezeh Achar Zeh, so then it's Oichit not Bevas Achas, so then we should say that since once you set aside the 10th, the 11th is irrelevant, so then when you set 10 and 11 at the same time, you didn't accomplish anything. But yet that's not what we're saying. We're saying, oh, one of them is going to be Meiser, and the other one I think is Be'etzem Shlomim, I think. Fine. So, but why don't we just say it's irrelevant? So it's Yotzer Shnai B'Asiri V'Karn Asiri Asir V'Achadasar Maravim Zeh Bo Zeh. So shiny Meiser Behema. So we say no. Don't ask me kashas for Meiser Behema. The Isa B'Tos, because Meiser Behema, when you make mistakes when it comes to Meiser Behema, so then we don't say it's irrelevant, right? We say let's go back there for a second. It's not as we learned in the Mishnah. Kar Lichi Asir, right? So he's counting, goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he gets up to 9, and he says this one is Meiser, even though it's a mistake. The 10th one is obviously Meiser. V'la Asiri Chiri, and then he gets up to the 10th one, he calls it the 9th one. He gets confused. V'la Achadasar Asiri, he calls 11 also 10. He got all mixed up. So Shloshtan Mikudashin, all three of them are Mikudashin. So Be'etzem what happens is the 9th one I think is Be'etzem, I think you wait till it gets a mum. The 10th one is going to be your Meiser Behema. The 11th one is a Shlomim. But all of them in that case, right, we don't say that it's completely irrelevant. So because when you make a mistake, it's not completely irrelevant. So then also we say that Bevas Achas, it's not completely irrelevant. Okay, fine. But Hare Toda, what about a Toda? The Leise B'Tos, that a korban toda, right? A korban toda, when you offer a korban toda, when you have something to be thankful about, so then you bring with it 40 loaves of bread. Now, if you, right, it's eno b'tos, right? So if you had set aside 40 loaves and you thought that they were whole wheat bread, turns out that they were white bread, so they're irrelevant, right? So she'eno b'tos. It's not like by Meiser Behema where we said if you make a mistake, it's not irrelevant, then there's the 9th, the 10th, the 11th. But by the breads of a korban toda, they are irrelevant. If you make a mistake, you thought that the breads were one thing, but they were something else, then they're nothing. So they're irrelevant when it comes to a mistake. So I already told the leisa b'tos that it's irrelevant when it's a tos, when it's a mistake. V'leisa nami baza achar zeh, and it's also irrelevant when it's baza achar zeh. What does that mean? It means that if you set aside these 40 breads as your toda breads, and then you say, and I'm also now setting aside these 40 breads as your toda breads, it's irrelevant, right? The second 40 breads are irrelevant. You already set aside the first 40. So it's eno baza achar zeh, right? It doesn't work sequentially. And yet, we're going to argue that if you set all 80 aside at the same time, it could work. Let's see. V'itmar was stated, toda shenishchata al shmonim chalos. So if you slaughter the korban toda on 80 breads, twice as many breads as you need. Chizkiya Omar, kad shelo arba'im mitoch shmonim. Chizkiya says that 40 of the 80 are relevant as the lachmei toda. So here we have a situation where, as we said, if you do one after the other, if you would set aside these 40 and then set aside another 40, that second 40 is irrelevant. And yet we're saying, according to Chizkiya, that if you set aside 80 breads for your lachmei toda, 40 of them are going to be relevant. We don't just say it's entirely irrelevant. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, lo kad shelo arba'im mitoch shmonim, whereas Rabbi Yochanan argues and says, no, 40 out of 80 would not become kadosh. But nonetheless, according to Chizkiya, they would. But, so we're asking, based on Chizkiya, that But Rabba, I thought that if sequentially it doesn't work, then at the same timely it also shouldn't work. Yet over here Chizkiah seems to be saying that if you set aside 80 breads at the same timely, so then 40 of them would be kadosh. But says the Gemara, don't get so excited because Lav Itmar Allah, wasn't it stated about the case of the Toda? Omer Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Hakol Modim, both Rabbi Yochanan and Chizkiah agree. Kol Heicha de Omar Kadshe lo Arboim mitoch Shmonim Kadshe, that both Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan agree that if he says that 40 out of the 80 should be Kadosh, only 40 out of the 80 should be Kadosh, well then they're Kadosh because he's setting aside 40. Lo yikadchu arbaim ela im kain kadshe shmonim lo kadshe. And if he says, no, 40 of them are shaykh only if all 80 of them are shaykh, so then it's irrelevant. Because only 40, not 80. Lo nechliku ela bistam. The machloik is between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan are when he sets aside 80 without giving specific instructions, whether it's only 40 or all 80, so then we have to figure out what his intention was. Ma'asar v'lachrayis michavin, lachrayis kamichavin, Chizkiah assumes that no, when he sets aside 80, he's not intending to set aside all 80. He just wants a backup plan. If something happens to the initial 40, so then he has an additional 40, as a backup. That's it. And that's why Chizkiah says that 40 of them nonetheless are kadosh. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan treats it as though he's setting aside all 80 of them, which doesn't work, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan says that none of them are kadosh, right? But everyone agrees in that case, like Rabbah says, that if he wants to set aside all 80, then that would be irrelevant. So we see that Rabbah's concept stands, which is if bazeh achar zeh, it does not work. For example, like by the Toda, when you set aside 40 breads and then set aside another 40 breads, and the second 40 are irrelevant. So also b'vas achas, it doesn't work, and both Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan agree that if you would set aside all 80 at the same time, it would be irrelevant. And here also, when it comes to the being Mekadesh two sisters or a mother and a daughter, right? If you're Mekadesh, let's say two sisters at the same time, it does not work. And also if you're Mekadesh, Fakir, if you were Mekadesh one sister and you're married to one sister, you then cannot be Mekadesh the second. So you also can't be Mekadesh them at the same time. Virove lama le leshanuye kiraba. And now this is a segue in to our next sugya of today, which is going to carry on into tomorrow as well. Now, according to Rave, lama le leshanuye kiraba, how come Rave is explaining our Mishnah like Rabbah, which is because we know from the pasuk that if it's bazeh achar zeh, it doesn't work. So then oichet b'vas achas, it doesn't work. And our Mishnah is talking about b'vas achas. Teipuk le Kiddushin shein misurin levia ninu. Well, why don't we say, because as we're going to see now, that we're about to see a machlok is Abaye and Rava. That Rava's opinion is that Kiddushin she'ein nimsarin lebia, Kiddushin that cannot result in bia, be'etzim cannot result in nisuin, in marriage, are not considered kiddushin at all. For example, if you are mekadesh, if you go over to two sisters and say, I'm being mekadesh one of you. He doesn't say which one. He's mekadesh one of two sisters. And so now what? You can't have nisuin, you can't That is Kiddushin that can't lead to Nisuin, right? The reason why I'm saying Nisuin, even though the phrase is Kiddushin Shenim Sarim Lebia, is because that's how Rashi explains it. If you look 5 lines from the bottom, Kiddushin Shenim Sarim Lebia, Kiddush Achos Mishtei Achayos V'lo Perish Ezo Me'em, if he's Mekadesh one of two sisters and doesn't say which one, De'en Yochol Lisa Achas Me'en, he can't take it to the next level with either one of them. The Shemazohi Achos Ishto, because maybe it's the sister of the one that is Mekadesh. If he's Mekadesh one of two sisters, he doesn't say which one, so now what? He can't be Mekadesh either one, because he doesn't know which one. He can't then marry, right, do Nisuin with either one, because, if he, obviously he can't marry both, because they're sisters, and if he chooses one, well, maybe it was the other one that he was Mekadesh, because he didn't say which one. And so therefore he can't marry either one of them because maybe it's the sister, and therefore it's Kiddushin Shein Nimsarim Lebia, Shein Misurin Lebia. So why is Rava explaining our Mishnah that he was Mekadesh two sisters at once? It doesn't work because, like Rabbah says, that Kol She Eino Baze Achaz Eino Bevas Achas, Why does he just say that it's Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia, which is his opinion? So answered the Gemara, the Dvar of the Rami Bar Chama Ka'amar. Well, he was explaining based on Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama brought a pasuk of Visha Lachosa Losikach Litzror, and Rami Bar Chama that said that that's talking about being Mekadesh two women two sisters at the same time. Rava says it can't be talking about the same time. You're gonna have to say that it's talking about Baza Achar. And our Mishnah is Bavas Achas, because then you'll say based on the principle of Kol She'enu Baza Achar Ze'enu Bavas Achas. But so he was responding, along the logic, the line of thought of Rami Bar Chama. However, Rava himself, Enochinami, would be able to say, Kiddushin She'ein Nimsarim Libia. Wow, Chevra, we are 26 minutes into today's daf. We are halfway through the first Amud. Exciting times. So now we see the machlokes between Abaye and Rava regarding Kiddushin She'ein Misurin Libia. Are they considered Kiddushin or not? You ready for this? Chaver, this is going to take us to the end of the daf. It's also going to take us into tomorrow's daf. The end of today's daf, just a shtickle to whet your appetite, something to look forward to. I'll mention some old friends. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Sarah, and Rivka. This is where this is going, friends. This is where this is going. Yom Kippur afternoon, during the break. We daven Nates at Yismach Moshe, and then we finished at noon, and then during the break there was Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua was over there. Must be a big gaon. As far as I'm concerned, he's a big gaon. So he was sitting there saying the entire Sefer Tehillim. I stayed for a bit. I was learning Babylon Talmud for a bit. I came back. I went home, went to sleep for an hour. Came back. He was still going weiter on the Tehillim. He finished the whole Sefer Tehillim during the break. Yom Kippur afternoon, Yismach Moshe in Yerushalayim. That I like that shul. Yismach Moshe is a good shul. It's a good shul. Let's go weiter. Okay, so now where are we? So I have to do that. So Itmar, who's Poshet, stated Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia. So you have Kiddushin that can't result in Be'etzim. As far as I'm concerned, Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia is Kiddushin that can't result in Nisuin, right? So for example, if you're Mekadesh two sisters and you don't say which one, so now you can't. So as opposed to if you just go up to two random girls, right? A fellow goes up to two fellas, and he's Mekadesh one of them. He doesn't know. He didn't specify which one. Okay, but he could still do Nisuin with one of them. In terms of the second one, maybe you have to give a get just in case. I don't know, but you can end up doing Nisuin without with one of them. You probably have to do Kiddushin again. I don't know, but the point is they're not. You haven't. You can still go weiter with one of them. That's not the case if you have two sisters or a mother and a daughter. Okay. So Itmar Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia. So if you have Kiddushin that can't lead to Bia, that can't lead to Nisuin Be'etzim, Abaye Amar Avu Kiddushin. Abaye says nonetheless there's still Kiddushin. You probably have to give Gittin to everybody. So according to Abaye, if you're Mekadesh one of two sisters, you don't say which one. So in stomach you'd have to give both of them a get. Rava Amar Lo Avu Kiddushin. Rava says no. If Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia, it's not Kiddushin Bechlal. It's a joke. It's irrelevant. Forget about it. Move on. Omar Rava. Says Rava Barahina Asberli, Barahina explained to me, where's a pasuk to back me up? What pasuk can we base this concept of Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia Ein Kiddushin? Ki ish isha uv'ala, that when there's Kiddushin, there has to be able to be a possibility of Bia. Kiddushin Mesurin Libia avu Kiddushin. Kiddushin Shein Mesurin Libia lo avu Kiddushin. Kiddushin that can result in Bia is Kiddushin. Kiddushin that can't result in Bia, nisht Kiddushin. Tanan. However, we ask a kasha from our Mishnah. HaMekadesh Isha Ovita. If a fellow is Mekadesh at the same time, at once, mother, daughter, or Isha V'achos, or two sisters, Ke'achas, Einan Mekudashus. It's not Kiddushin, because he says that being Mekadesh both of you at the same time is not Kiddushin. The implication being, Ha'achas me Isha Uvita, or me Isha V'achosa Mekudeshes. But, if he just says, he goes over to two sisters and says, I'm being Mekadesh one of you, well then, it's Kiddushin Shein Misurin Libya, right? You can't do Nisun because who know, either one you'd want to do Nisun with, you have to be concerned, but maybe it was Mekadesh the other one. So, but we're saying that it is good Kiddushin. The Kiddushin itself is Kiddushin. Some you'd have to get a get or whatever. We don't just throw it out the window. So we say, even though it's Kiddushin Shem Misurin Libya, we're saying it's Kiddushin. We're saying that if he's Mekadesh both of them at the same time, it's not Kiddushin. But if he's Mekadesh only one of them, then it would be Kiddushin, even though it's Kiddushin Shem Misurin Libya. Ve'amai Kiddushin Shem Misurin Libya ninu. Tiyuf to the Rava, so it's a kasha on Rava. Omar lach Rava. Rava fires back with a taimech. But people, according to you, ema seifa. Let me ask you guys, you people, a kasha from the seifa. You say that Kiddushin Shem Misurin Libya is Kiddushin? You ready for this? Maise b'chomish noshim. There was a maise with 5 women. Uvain shtei achayis, 2 of the 5 were sisters. V'liket echad kalkola shel teinim, a fellow put together a basket of figs. V'shaloy naisa, the figs belonged to these women. V'shal shviyas naisa, and it was shmita. V'omar, and he says, Harei kulchem. We're going to explain why that's relevant tomorrow. V'omar harei kulchem mikudashosli. All of you people, all of you women are mikudashos to me b'chalkala zo with this basket. The Chacham said, Ein achayos mikudashos. And we say the sisters are not mikudashos. The others, yes, but not the sisters. Achayos hu de'enon mikudashos. We're saying the sisters are not mikudashos. Hanachrios mikudashos. But the other 3 are. Now, hechidami. Now, how is this going down? Now, if it's that he Pashit goes up to these 5 women, 2 of them are sisters, then there's another 3 that are unrelated, and he says, I'm being Mekadesh, all of you. Now, one second. Here, he's giving Kiddushin to to these 3 women who are unrelated. The Kiddushin is relevant. To these 2 women, the Kiddushin who are sisters, the Kiddushin is irrelevant. So in one Kiddushin, you have relevant and irrelevant. That's basically the equivalent of if he says to a person, okay, there's Reuven says to Shimon, there's you and there's the donkey over there. I'm gonna be makne to you and also to the donkey at the same time. Excuse me, to you and the donkey at the same time. So obviously a donkey can't acquire anything. So when he says I'm being makne to you and the donkey at the same time, the donkey is irrelevant. And therefore, Shimon's irrelevant too, right? He's not saying anything. It's irrelevant in that case. So here also, if he says Rava, I don't understand. If he goes over to this whole group of 5 that includes 2 sisters who obviously can't be Mekadesh because they're sisters, and he says to be Mekadesh everybody, it's like being Makne to a person and a donkey at the same time. It's irrelevant. So here also, if he's Makne to a whole group, but 2 of them are sisters, so some of them are relevant, some of them are not, the whole thing's irrelevant. So it cannot be that he's being Mekadesh the whole group at once. El alav, so rather Rava explains, how do you have to understand the Mishnah? The Omar Luhu, that he says to them, Achas mikem, I'm being Mekadesh one of you. And guess what we're saying? Vikatoni ein achayus mikudashos. And we're saying that forget about the sisters. Right? If he goes up to this group of 5, 2 of them are sisters, 3 of them are unrelated, and he says, I'm being Mekadesh one of you, we're saying, okay, it's going to be one of the other 3. It's not going to be one of the sisters. Why not? Why can't we say that it's one of the sisters? Why? Because it's Kiddushin Shen Misurin Libya? According to you people, who cares? The Kiddushin, right, still one of them could be Mikudeshes. Why are we just assuming that, no, forget, it's irrelevant to the sisters, it's got to be one of the 3 that's Mikudeshes? Says Rava, from this part of the Mishnah, it seems to be proving that I'm right. That the sisters are irrelevant because it's Kiddushin Shen Misurin Libya. And therefore the Kiddushin must be for one of the other 3. So the Reisha of the Mishnah, when we say that if he's Mekadesh the sisters at the same time, it doesn't work. Implying that if he's Mekadesh both of them, it doesn't work. But if he's Mekadesh one of them, and he doesn't say which one, it is good Kiddushin. So that supports Abaye, who says Kiddushin Shem Misurin Libya have a Kiddushin. But the Seifa, at least as explained by Rava, which says that he's being Mekadesh one of the 5, and we immediately disqualify the two sisters because it's Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia. Supports Rav who says Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia Einon Kiddushin. So Kasha, so L'Rave Kasha Reisha, L'Abaye Kasha Seifa. According to Rave, the Reisha of the Mishnah is problematic. According to Abaye, the Seifa of the Mishnah is problematic. So Abaye mitaritz the time. So where am I? So L'Rave Kasha Reisha, L'Abaye Kasha Seifa. Abaye mitaritz the time. Rave mitaritz the time. So not to worry. Both kind of explain how the Mishnah makes sense according to their view. How to explain the Mishnah in line with their view. Abaye mitaritz the time. He's starting with Abaye. So Abaye says Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia Havu Kiddushin. So he says Hamikadesh Isha Uvita, a fellow who's Mikadesh, a mother and daughter, or Isha V'Achos, or two sisters, Ke'achas at the same exact time. He says I'm being Mikadesh both of you. Einan Mikudashos, they are not Mikudashos. Ha'achas Meisha Uvita, but if he's Mikadesh one of a mother-daughter duo, Meisha V'Achosa, or of two sisters, Mikudeshes, they are Mikudeshes, even though it's Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia, it's nonetheless Kiddushin. V'im Amar Haru'uya Labia Tiskadesh Li, but if he says, the one who is Ru'uya Labia is Mikudeshes to me, well then, in Mikudeshes, then they're not Mikudeshes, because neither one is Ru'uya Labia. U'maise Nami, and there was Oiche the Maise, B'chomesh Noshim, with 5 women who won Shtei Achayis, and 2 of them were sisters. V'liket echad kalkola shalteinim, and one of them put together some figs, a basket of figs. V'amar, and he says, Haru'uya li mikem tiskadesh li. Only somebody who is fit to me is going to be mikudeshes to me. V'amu chachamim ein achayos mikudashos. And the chacham say, well, that then excludes the sisters because the sisters are not fit to him. So it must be one of the others. Okay, fine, very good. Rav mitaritz the time. Rav explains the Mishnah according to him. Rav, of course, says Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia Lo Avu Kiddushin. Hamikadesh Achas Meisha Uvita. He explains the Mishnah that if a fellow is Mikadesh one of a mother or daughter, but doesn't say which one, or Achas Meisha V'Achos, or one of 2 sisters, but he doesn't say which one. Naise Kemisha Kidesh Isha Uvita O Isha V'Achos. It's as though he's Mikadesh both of them Ke'achas at the same time, ve'enon mikudashos, and it's no kiddushin at all because kiddushin shem misurin labia lo avu kiddushin. U'maise nami b'chomesh noshin, there was oichet a maise with 5 women, uvayin shtei achayos, 2 of them were sisters. V'liket echod kalkola shalteinim, and a fellow put together a basket of figs. Ve'omar, and he says, harei kulchem ve'achas mishtei achayos mikudashos li, that all of you, but only one of the 2 sisters are mikudashos to me, but he doesn't say which one. B'chakola, with this basket. So the Chacham said that the sisters are not mikudashos because when it's mikadesh one of 2 sisters, it's kiddushin shem misurin labia, and it's lo havu kiddushin. Okay, fine, very good. So that was the machlokas between Rava and Abaye. Rava says kiddushin shem misurin labia Lo Havu Kiddushin. Abaye says Kiddushin Masurin Labia Havu Kiddushin. And now we're going to ask some kashas on Rav. Here we go. Toshma, come in here. Hamikadesh as Bito Stam. A fellow is Mikadesh one of his daughters. Eina Bogris Bichlal, Haktanos Bichlal. So let's say you have a fellow, he's got 4 daughters, 2 of them are adults, 2 of them are minors. And he's Mekadesh one of his daughters. So we say it excludes the adults, but the Kiddushin will be Chal for the minors, because the fellow could be Mekadesh his Ketana's daughters. So, but Ve'amai, why would the Kiddushin be Chal? Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia Ninu. If there are 2 sisters, how could he just be Mekadesh one of them without specifying? It's Kiddushin Shem Misurin Labia. Why are we saying that he could be Mekadesh them? It's a Kasha and Rava. V'truv to the Rava, it's a Kasha and Rava. Amalach Rava will respond, Hochav ma'iskinun b'she'ein sham ele gdola v'ktana. Well, it's talking about where there's only 2 daughters. One of them is an adult, one of them is a ketana. We're saying that obviously the Kiddushin doesn't apply to the adults because he can't be Mekadesh his adult daughters, they're adults. He can only be Mekadesh a ketana or a naira. So we're saying he's got 2 daughters, one's a bogeris, one is not. And he can't accept the Kiddushin for the Bogeres, so he's accepting it for the Ketana. Ha-Bogris Katani, but it says Bogris, which is plural, implying that the Ketanos are Oichit, plural, not just one. So my Bogris Da'alma. It's meaning it can't be one Bogeres and one Ketana. There's multiple Bogris, implying that there's also multiple Ketanas. We say Nisht. My Bogris, what does Bogris mean? Bogris Da'alma. No, meaning Bogris in general, right? Adult daughters in general, but not that this particular fellow had many adult daughters. If that's the case, that it's talking about one adult and one minor, what's the Chiddush? I mean, isn't that obvious? We already know. A fellow cannot be Mekadesh his adult daughter, so clearly he's not being Mekadesh her. Memeli is being Mekadesh the minor. So Achav Ma'eskinon Deshavisa Shaliach. Well, it's talking about where the adult daughter appointed her father as her messenger to accept Kiddushin on her behalf. Well, now, Ma'odetema, I may have thought, Ki Mekabel Kiddushay Adaita Dido Ka Mekabel Kamaj Malon. So we may have thought to say that, well, since he could obviously be Mekadesh his minor daughter, and his adult daughter made him a messenger to receive her Kiddushin as well, so now he could be Mekadesh either one of them. And so I may have thought that in this case, he would be Mekadesh the adult daughter. Lo shad so kamashman de lo shavik inish midi de isle anoya mine, that a fellow is not going to ignore the one that he gets benefit from, meaning he has the right to his minor daughter's Kiddushin, and therefore if he accepts them, he will be getting hanoah from it. And but the adult daughter, I mean, he's her messenger, but he's not going to receive the Kiddushin, the money, so therefore he will prioritize his minor daughter, where he will be able to take home some money. Milo askinon de amrle Kiddushay ledidoch, but for the Gemara, but I mean, when the Mishnah said, when the Brisa says that it applies to the minor and not to the adult, isn't that even talking about, isn't that in all cases, even if the adult daughter says that you can keep the money, and still it would be the minor daughter? So even so, lo shavik inish mitzvah de ramya alei, v'avid mitzvah de lo ramya alei. But still, it's a mitzvah for a father to marry off his adult daughter, his minor daughter. Now, meaning, we've said, of course, that you're supposed to wait until she gets older. But meaning, theoretically, if you would do it, it is a mitzvah. Right? The pasuk, right? The Rashi quotes a pasuk, "Ves benosechem tunu lanashim," give your daughters to men. So, because marrying off your, doing the Kiddushin, doing the mitzvah of Kiddushin for your minor daughter, you can't do it for an adult daughter, but doing the mitzvah of Kiddushin for a minor daughter is a mitzvah. So therefore, if a father is accepting Kesef Kiddushin, right, he has an adult daughter and a minor daughter, and he accepts Kesef Kiddushin for one of them, we can assume it's for the minor daughter where he has a mitzvah to do so. Okay, fine. But it is not a proof for Kiddushin Shem Yisur in Libya is good Kiddushin. Tashma, come in here. Mishesh lo shtei kitei bonis. A fellow has two groups of daughters, right? Mishtei noshim, from two wives, right? He was married to one wife, he had two daughters with her, then he got married to another wife, let's say that this is how it worked, and then he had two daughters with her. So you have two groups of daughters, and one group is older, the other group is younger. V'amar kidashti esbiti hagadola. And he says, well, now I'm in a pickle. I was mikadesh my older daughter. What does that mean? Now I don't know what I just did. Im gidola shebigdolos, was a mikadesh the older of the older pair. Vim gidola shebiktanos, so maybe it's the older of the younger two. Im kitana shebigdolos, maybe it's the younger of the older two. Sheikib gidola min hagadola shebigdolos shebiktanos, which is still older than the older of the youngers. We know for sure, Divrei Meir, we know for sure that the youngest of the younger group, the younger pair, is not Mekudesh. That's for sure. But when he said that he was Mekadesh his Gedola daughter, we don't know. Is it the oldest of the oldest of the youngest of the oldest, which is older than the older of the youngest? Unclear. But the kasha is, I don't understand. How could it be that he accepted Kiddushin for multiple daughters? Isn't that Kiddushin Shem Yisur in Libya? How could that be Kiddushin? How come we're saying that the only one who's not Mekudeshes is the absolute youngest? None of them should be Mekudashos. Kiddushin Shem Yisur in Libya. So here what are we talking about? Kishahukru levasof nisarvu. Well, it's talking about where initially he was Mekadesh a particular daughter. When he said Gedola, he was referring to one of his daughters, but then he forgot which one. And now it becomes a mess. But initially, he was Mekadesh a particular daughter, and that's why it was good Kiddushin. Dekanam, you can also infer Dekatani that it says Eni Yodea, and it says I don't currently know which one. Lokatani Eni Yadu, it doesn't say that it was never known which one. I don't currently know which one. But he was Mekadesh one of them initially, and that's why it worked. Shma Mina. So we see that is the case, but it's not talking about where it was Mekadesh multiple daughters. But Yehochi, Ma'ile Meimer, then what's the Chiddush? Kilu, obviously, if he was Mekadesh one of his daughters, who he was referring to as the Gedola, so that was good Kiddushin at the time. Now he forgets which one it was, so now we have now we have to be concerned, is it the older of the younger, etc. Like, this is all obvious. Well, Enachinami, but La'afukim de Rabbi Yossi, the point is just to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the Amar, who says, Lo machis inish nafshe l'sfeika. Now Rabbi Yossi says, look, a person is not going to put himself into a place of doubt, and therefore if he says the oldest, the Gedola, it means the absolute oldest. We can assume he's referring to the oldest of the older group. Kamash Malan, so the chiddush of this brisa of Reb Meir is that the machis inish nafshe l'sfeika. The Reb Meir argues on Reb Yossi and says, no, a person will put himself into a place of safek, and when he says the Gedola, we actually are unsure. Is it the Gedola sheb Gedola, Gedola sheb Ktanish, Ktanish sheb Gedolas, etc.? We actually are unsure. And now just to wrap up today's daf and sort of segue into tomorrow's daf with a beautiful Gemara from Yevamis. Enjoy. Tashma, come in here. Mishek Kidesh Achas. I'm sure there's probably that one person who liked Yevamis, right? So this is for you. By the way, if it's you, speak up. Let us know. Let us show yourself. Reveal yourself. Let us know who's the Yevamis Jew around here. Tashma, Mishek Kidesh Achas Mishtei Achais. If a fellow was Mekadesh one of two daughters, Venu Yodea Ezo Kidesh, but he doesn't. One of two sisters. He doesn't know which one. Okay, a fellow is Mekadesh a fella and her sister, not sure which one. Right? He was Mekadesh one of them, not sure which one. Noticing get lazo v'get lazo. He gives a get to both of them. So clearly, it was Kiddushin, that's why he has to give a get. And even though it's Kiddushin Shem Mesur and Labiyah, we're saying that it's Kiddushin and he has to give a get. So it's a kasha and rava. No, here also it's talking about where he initially knew which one he was Mekadesh, but then he forgot. And nobody knows. And now it's a mess. He's got to give getting to both of them. But initially it was good Kiddushin. And also it says he doesn't currently know which one, but it doesn't say that it was never known. No, he currently doesn't know. If that's the case, then what's the Chiddush? Obviously it was Mekadesh a fellow. A fellow is Mekadesh a fellow. She happens to have a sister. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Two people get married. The girl is a sister. That's acceptable. But then, where things get all kind of weird, but then they forgot which one, and now we don't know. So you got to give a get to both. But that's obvious. So, Seifa is Tzricha we need it for the Seifa. Mace, here we go. What if the fellow dies? So now, let's not refer to fellow, fella, and sister. Let's pull out the big guns. Reuven, Sarah, Rivka, Shimon, and Levi. But Levi's not coming just yet. Reuven, Sarah, Rivka, and Shimon. Here we go. Mace. Reuven dies. So Reuven was Mekadesh, one of Sarah, well, let's say this. Well, yeah, Reuven was Mekadesh, Sarah, or Rivka. At the time he knew, but then things got weird and everybody forgot. So now, one of them is Mekudeshes. We don't know. We have to give getting to both of them. But then he dies. Reuven's dead. So now, Shimon inherits this mess. Now he's got to do Yibum. Now, he doesn't know with who. So Reuven has a brother Shimon. Cholitza shtein, easy enough. So Shimon does chalitza with both of them, and then everybody goes on with their lives. Hayilo shnayim. But what if there was also Levi? So Reuven dies, and there's Shimon and Levi, and there's also Sarah and Rivka. Now, one of Sarah or Rivka was married to Reuven. We don't was Mikudeshes to Reuven. We don't know which one. So Echad Choletz, So Shimon does chalitza with Sarah, ve'echad miyabim, at which point Levi can do yibum with Rivka. Should we explain why? Sure, why not? Shimon does chalitza with Sarah, with either one of them, let's just say Sarah, because, look, if Sarah was the one that was married to Reuven, so he's got to do chalitza with her. If Sarah was not the one that was married to Reuven, so he's doing chalitza, who cares? It doesn't hurt. Levi can then have bia with Rivka, and again, if Rivka was the one that was married to Reuven, so then he's doing yibum with Rivka, right? Levi's doing yibum with Rivka. If Rivka was not the one that was married to Reuven, so he's marrying Rivka. And Shimon had already done chalitza with Sarah, so all good. Now, if Shimon married Sarah and Levi married Rivka, we'll go weiter in a second, but it's not ideal. But they could, but they don't. Nobody needs to get divorced or anything. Let's go weiter for a second. We'll get back to this. Now, davka michalitz v'ado yabume, and specific. The order is important. The ordering is important here. That specifically, Shimon first does chalitza with Sarah, and only then can Levi marry or do yibum with Rivka. Aval yabume v'ado michalitz, but if Shimon does yibum first with Sarah and then Levi does chalitza with Rivka, lo, do not do that. Dikapaga b'achos kukaso, because you have to be concerned about achos kukaso. Meaning, if Shimon first does yibum with Sarah and then Levi does chalitza with Rivka, but what if Rivka was the one who was married to Reuven? Which means that at the time that Shimon does yibum with Sarah, Sarah is the sister of Rivka. Rivka was the one who was married to Reuven, which means that Shimon at that time had a zika with Rivka, which means that he was marrying Sarah at the time when he had a zika with Rivka. So Sarah is achos kukaso. So Shimon can't marry Sarah before, if there hasn't yet been chalitza with Rivka. So therefore, we say that no. What happens is Shimon does chalitza with Sarah. At that point, if Sarah was married to Reuven, so then chalitza has been done, and there's no longer a zika. If Sarah was not married to Reuven, well then, when Levi marries Rivka, then he's doing yibum with Rivka, which is fine. But don't do it vice versa, and that also gets back to. But when we said, but if Shimon married Sarah and Levi married Rivka, we say we can leave things as they are, because even if it was Rivka who was married to Reuven, which means that when Shimon married Sarah, it was achos kukaso, but then when Levi married Rivka, he's doing yibum with Rivka, at which point there's no longer a zika, and it basically retroactively clears it up. So milichatchila you shouldn't do that, but if you did it, ultimately everything got cleared up. Friends, that was the Daf Aleph of Masechta Kiddushin. Got very got a shtukah yevamasi at the end over there. Be'etzim, I'll say the main sugyas that we learned about today were kol she'eino bazeh achazeh eino b'vasa achas. That was an interesting sugya. And then we saw the machlokes between Abaye and Rava, which we're going to continue with and complete tomorrow, with an interesting conclusion about Kiddushin Shemusur and Labia. Abaye says have a Kiddushin, Rava says lo have a Kiddushin. Friends, peace out.